human beings. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Justice Conversations. I am your host, Maya Pai. And if you're new here, welcome. If you are open to having tough conversations about society, then this is the place for you. Last week we talked about Amanda Gorman and her speech, The Hill We Climb, and its relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you to all who tuned in for that. In today's podcast episode, we will be discussing the second generation immigrant experience and language erasure. As you can probably see, we have a guest for today's topic. His name is Evan Villamore, and he's a freshman at the College of Charleston Honors Program. And I'm so excited to be hosting with him. As children of immigrants, though with varying experiences, we want to have a candid conversation about our identity issues, our experiences, and how we have struggled with mother tongue erasure. And just for reference, mother tongues are basically like a first language. They're the language that your parents or guardians have spoken from when you were a kid. And we're here to have this conversation because we think it needs to be talked about more to make the second generation immigrant experience less isolating, because it can be, as you will see. So I first want to start by telling y'all more about our backgrounds so you know more about us. Evan, would you mind sharing first?
Hello, I'm Evan. So I was born in the Philippines. I lived there for about 12 years before I moved here. So I, of course, knew Cebuano, which was what we spoke at our hometown or like our island actually. And then I also knew Tagalog, which was the official language of the
Yeah.
Philippines. And I, of course, knew English, but I didn't pronounce it very well until I moved here. So I still know Cebuano and I still know part of Tagalog. Like I can understand it when someone speaks to me in that language, but I can't necessarily speak it fluently
Yeah.
myself. So that's what I have right now, but I'm still very fluent in Cebuano, since that's what I kind of speak with my parents a lot. So
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And as for me, I was born in the US, and so I've lived here my entire life. But my parents are actually from India, and they grew up there. And they both speak a language called Konkani, and it's actually more of a dialect because it doesn't actually have a written form, which is kind of cool. But that kind of brings me to like my main point that growing up speaking a language that wasn't English wasn't really seen as cool. I mean, as a kid, I remember I was scared to speak Konkani in public because I had other seen people, and I'll be honest, predominantly white people, look down on other families for speaking a different language. I didn't even want to wear like Indian clothes because that didn't seem American to me. It didn't seem like I was part of that culture if I did something like that. And at a really young age, I felt this pressure to prove that I was American. And it caused me to have a pretty bad relationship with my mother tongue. And I don't know if you had a similar experience, Evan, or
yeah, so when I moved here, I definitely had like a fear of like, oh my God, um, everyone in America is gonna hate me, or like, I'm not necessarily that, but like I
yeah,
was scared that it was gonna be that experience because I've never been here, and
yeah,
I've only heard stories and stuff. So there was definitely a level of like needing us to assimilate,
yeah,
and I was scared that I wasn't gonna have any friends because I was somewhat of an extrovert and I had a lot of friends back home. So when I moved here, I tried to of course, like my idea was, fitting in and then having a lot of friends through that. But like I still ended up kind of introverted and shy around everyone because yeah, like there was that level of like, oh my gosh, like I was very insecure about the way I pronounced words in English because it was not my first language. Like I
yeah,
was confident enough to engage in English class or write essays, and I was pretty proficient, but there was the pronunciation, and I know and it's also South Carolina. Like
yeah.
there's a
Okay, we're also
reputation
in the
of
South. So,
racism, so that was also scary. So I definitely
yeah,
had the same experience. I do want to acknowledge the fact that it's not just like pressure, like external pressure from like a
yeah,
different culture, but it's also within the same culture because I
Oh,
remember
for sure.
moving here, um, my like some of my relatives who are also like immigrants, or yeah, they felt the need to kind of criticize my pronunciation and or they would laugh at like several pronunciation or
Oh,
ways
yeah.
I would pronounce things, and I was like,
Yeah.
hold on, you're also immigrant, so an immigrant, so like I don't
Yeah.
know where this is coming from.
And then I think that also ties into a lot of children of immigrants or even children of minority families. It's like I don't know if you've ever felt like you're not American enough, but you're also not
Mhm,
enough of the culture that your parents are from
mhm,
because it's like you see people that are more stereotypically like that culture and you're like, I don't fit in. And I've also had that experience where it's like I don't wanna be laughed at for the way I say something, even though I'm definitely trying and I'm not trying to mess up, but it happens, and I don't necessarily think that they mean to be mean, they just think it's funny, but it's kinda it kinda works the other
mhm.
way around.
Yeah, and I do notice that, like, some, like, pronunciations or accents are praised, though, but if they're more, like, Eurocentric or, like, they're
Oh,
more
for
like
sure.
the white one, like, like, "Oh my god, that guy has a British accent. Oh my god, that's so hot," or like, "Oh, the French accent, love." But, like, languages and accents of the Asian culture, like, are definitely not seen that way. So
Oh,
I feel like that
yes.
it also roots in like, some racism. I definitely
No, I
don't think
agree.
but it's also like kind of deep rooted in culture though, because like I feel like in a lot of like movies and stuff, they would make the Asian characters have a stereotypically Asian accent
Mhm.
and they would laugh at it and that would be like a comedic relief or
Yeah,
whatever.
the
So
Indian person is always
yeah,
the person that everyone makes fun of.
it's usually
Um,
like the like Indian accent or like
Even
some
Chinese
Chinese
accents, I feel
accent.
like you see a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like
This is
Hispanic
actually
too.
yeah, this is something that we talked about in Spanish actually, is that a lot of the times, like, these Asian and even African, accents,
Mhm.
they're you see them a lot with villains too, so it's like so you see, like, all, like, sometimes the good guys, they tend to have, like, British accents or
Yeah.
French accents. Well, French sometimes is like villainous, but we don't need to get into that. But it's like you even have like examples of that in like the things that are supposed to be pretty like innocent, but
Yeah.
you have that like acting on you and influencing your opinions. And I imagine that that definitely has an impact on children too
Mhm.
as they're growing up. If they see that.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a subconscious decision, but regardless, like it definitely has a big impact on how people view accents and it definitely doesn't help with like microaggressions. So,
Yeah, and microaggressions are really
yeah.
interesting.
They're
We
interesting
don't have to
because
get into that in this
yeah,
episode, but that's
because
definitely a good idea
mhm.
for another episode, is
Yeah.
talk about microaggressions
Yep.
because they do exist. And then I just wanted to bring up that, I don't think this applies that much to you, Evan, but personally, the pressure I felt outside and within my own culture sort of led me to like stop speaking Konkani even within like my own house. So that pressure has had a real like negative effect on me. I feel like people don't realize that those perspectives do have an effect on people. So like I can't really speak Konkani that well anymore because
Mhm.
I stopped practicing it because I didn't feel safe enough to practice it. And I
Mhm.
think that's actually something that happens to a lot of people. And it's
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, definitely. Like I that's the reason why I don't really know Tagalog anymore, but like part of the reason why because my parents don't really speak at home either. But
Yeah.
like I definitely speak a little bit more English at home than I should be, and I'm worried that like I'm gonna lose Cebuano because I like don't live with them anymore. So
Mhm.
like that was kind of like the only way that I was preserving Cebuano is, when I got home, like I would speak
Yeah.
Cebuano and stuff. So that definitely is a fear now. Like it didn't used to be until it became one, and then you know, mm, I definitely do. I would love to still have like Cebuano and Tagalog my entire life. I don't think I'll ever lose Cebuano, but it's still a fear somewhere
Yeah.
there.
I think the other thing is I feel like we'll never forget like how to understand it.
Yeah,
It's like the speaking part that
yeah,
that's like the scariest part is like losing that completely because I can still speak
under
Konkani. It takes more
yeah,
effort than it used to,
mhm,
but it's like I don't want to lose that because I'm sure you feel this way, but it's like
mhm,
a part of your identity.
yeah,
Is
and
it helps
yeah,
you communicate with your family members and connect with your culture.
mhm,
I'm a huge proponent that languages hold culture within them.
mhm,
Um, and I mean, if you just look at like the cultures, I mean, the languages that exist in the world today, they're definitely declining because
yeah,
English and everything is taking over. And with like languages declining, it's also like you're seeing a loss of some of that culture because there is
mhm,
culture in language.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
definitely do think that because I know that like when you go back if you go to the Philippines, and I'm sure this is, like, true in, like, everywhere else, but when you go to
Yeah.
the Philippines and you don't speak their language, then they're definitely gonna take advantage of you in terms of, like,
Oh,
in
that's the same for
tourism.
India, yeah.
So, yeah, so, like, I don't wanna lose that because I don't wanna, because I was definitely born there. I lived there for 12 years, and I still consider myself,
Yeah,
like,
that's
Filipino. So, like, I don't wanna lose that, and I want, like, the people that I used to live with still consider me kind of like family, or, like, live or a person who is from that culture.
yeah.
So that's also a genuine fear that I have. But I don't think it'll happen, but, you know, I
Yeah,
feel like
no,
I
but
will.
it's just something that you think about in
Mhm.
relation to your language.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was, um, I think there's a lot of disconnect about, like, what an American is,
Mhm.
and this is it relates to people that aren't just the children of immigrants, I would say minorities in general.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, I just wanted to ask, like, what do you think an American is? Like, what is the definition of American? Because I would say, I feel like when most people think of an American, they think of maybe a white male.
Mhm.
And that is definitely not the entire spectrum of
Yeah.
Americans.
So for me, like I kind of have a trouble like um thinking about this one.
Yeah, a lot of people
I
just,
yeah, like I okay, I'm not like a citizen yet officially. Like my parents or
mhm,
my dad has not like applied for citizenship. Like we're currently legal immigrants or permanent residents of America.
right.
But I think what defines someone as American is like if they interact with American culture or American culture affects them. So, or like that's kind of like a very broad like definition because, the globalization of like American culture through social media definitely like makes that a little weird.
Yeah,
But if you like live here and you're affected, I guess legally,
yeah,
in legal aspects of America and its culture, then I feel like you can definitely consider yourself American. And yeah,
I
it's
agree.
definitely not just the white person because you can be totally like born here and not white. So
Exactly. Me.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so my answer to that question is I agree with that. And I would say it's also kind of complicated because it's kind of like the issue of trying to change people's mindset. Because if you think about it in the idea of like the immigrant issue, I suppose, other than like the Americans that were actually native to this country, everyone else, including everyone who came from England and everywhere else, they're still immigrants, right? So
Yeah.
this country is literally a country of immigrants, and people really forget that. They
Hmm.
really do. And I feel like some people think like if they've been here for a long time, it like makes them more superior. This isn't everyone like this, but like
Hmm.
they feel like it makes them more superior or more American than other people, which I would say is untrue. But
No. Yeah.
yeah. But that's just something for you all to think about.
Mhm.
So, we have come to the end of our show. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Please join me next week for a discussion about code switching and why scholars argue it has segregationist roots. Huge thank you to Evan for joining me this week.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you so
Um,
much. It
of
was great.
course.
Love.
And stay safe and remember to keep the tough conversations going. Bye.
Bye.